News, views, voices of the global Indian community. India abroad.
So AAHOA is comprised of nearly 20,000 members who own more than 60% of all hotels across the United States. So our AAHOA-Con is what we call it. It's the AAHOA Convention, and it's an opportunity to bring the members together. And we have everything from the general session, where we bring in keynote speakers, we make announcements. Each of the officers and we provide speeches to provide overviews of the accomplishments from the prior year. So that is an important part of our AAHOA-Con. We also have a very large trade show. We set historic records this year with the number of booths sold at the trade show. And these are all the vendors that provide products and services to our members. And they are very interested in coming to AAHOA-Con because it's the only place that they can actually have access to the hotel owners, not the general managers, not the other staff members, but the actual owners who come to AAHOA-Con to make buying decisions. They're the decision makers. And then, of course, we have networking opportunities, education for our members. And last night we had a lovely welcome reception where everyone came together. Tonight we have what's called the block party, where again, our members come together. There's fabulous food and music. And so it's really quite a celebration of what our members have accomplished and achieved. The members of AAHOA are Indian Americans who emigrated to the United States in the 1900s and started buying hotels. And so this concept of buying hotels and expanding portfolios has been continuing now for many years. AAHOA started in 1989. And so we're celebrating our 35th anniversary this year. So our members are the actual hotel owners. And it ranges from somebody that might own a single mom and pop independent hotel to somebody that owns maybe 50 or 100 hotels, or who is part of a REIT and that they own hotels. So our membership ranges, and the ages too of our members range from young professionals all the way up to, some of our members are in their 60s, 70 years old, and they've been owning and operating hotels for many years. So it's quite a range, but that's why AAHOA is so unique, because it's such a community of Indian hoteliers, most who came from Gujarat, and they came to the United States and now own more than 60% of hotels and really took over the hotel industry. So it's such a story of success. Well, and so out of our nearly 20,000 members, I personally think it's probably 19,500 at least that have the last name Patel. It's the vast majority of our members have the last name Patel. Well, from what I understand is, especially in Gujarat, there's, the last name Patel is very common. Just like here in the United States, the last name Smith is very common. And it's a community, so families came over, and I heard at least early on that when they came over to the United States, they were trying to determine what business to get into. Many of them have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I think they looked at fast food restaurants, but of course, with their Hindu religious beliefs, to be cooking meat, was not ideal. And so they looked at hotels because they could own a hotel. In the early days, they could live in the hotel and they could operate a business that way. And it became so highly successful that they passed it throughout the community. So it's such a tribute, talk about an American dream success story, that's what our members have accomplished and achieved. Now we're going into the third generation of hoteliers originally from India, grandparents originally from India, and have now reached this level. Right, so I don't have those exact numbers in front of me. I can get those for you. But it's actually quite a large percentage to the US GDP I believe it's 1.7% of the U.S. GDP is from our hotelier members. And of course, they employ millions of employees, as well as they have kind of an indirect impact on other service industries. And what I mean by that, you think of a hotel and what an impact that has with, respect to Uber and Lyft drivers and pizza delivery, service people, or DoorDash, because they all have to help, service the hotel and the community. So it's an amazing impact that our members have had. Yes, so it's common at most of our AAHOA cons. We do have a large number of educational sessions. And some of the key concerns that our members are facing right now is property insurance. The premiums for property insurance has just skyrocketed in the last couple of years. There's a significant labor shortage in our country. So for our hotelier members to find, front desk clerks, to find housekeepers, to find general managers, it's a struggle every single day. As part of AAHOA too, many of our members have franchised hotels. And what I mean by that is when they bought their first franchised hotel, that's one that with a recognized brand name. It might be a Best Western, it might be a Super 8, it might be a Comfort Inn, or maybe it's a Hampton Inn. So they got into the franchise side. Well, these franchise agreements are somewhat complicated. Many of them are quite thick, and when you sign a franchise agreement, it's pretty standard that it's for 20 years. And so one thing that AAHOA has always advocated for is fair franchising, because for our members to sign these agreements, sometimes over a period of 20 years, the relationship can change and maybe there's new, challenges. So AAHOA often will go and work with the franchisors to address that. But we also like to educate our members that when they're negotiating their franchise agreements, these are some of the things that you should be mindful of, that you could negotiate, because in the end, over 20 years, you need a strong contract to make sure you're protected. Yes. So one in particular, and I come from a legal background. I'm a lawyer by training. So one thing we're always taught is anytime you sign a contract, make sure you figure out what happens if you have to exit early or if you have to terminate it early. So always look at your exit clause. So this is an important aspect for franchise agreements and for our members, because when you sign a 20-year agreement, of course, you're anticipating it's going to be highly successful and you are going to do a marvelous job and your hotel is going to be the best in whatever area you're in. But if that doesn't happen, and then you determine that you can no longer continue, how much does it cost to terminate the agreement? And that's what we try to educate our members on. The standard in the industry is 36 months of royalties would be your liquidated damages. And in some agreements, it's actually 60 months. So what does that mean? That means if you want to terminate before your 20-year term is up, you have to pay 3 to 5 years worth of royalties to get out of that agreement. And that can cost hundreds of thousands, and depending on the hotel, maybe even $1 million or more. And that's to leave early. So we often talk to our members about look closely at what that is, what that means. Another big one for a lot of our members is area protection. And so what is that? Well, say you sign a certain brand name hotel on your street corner. You don't want that same brand opening up right across the street, right? I mean, you expect competition from other brands, but not from your same brand. So you try to negotiate an area protection that the franchisor agrees that they will not build or will not allow anyone else to build or open a brand with that exact same name, that exact same flag. And maybe if you're in the Midwest, maybe that area protection is 3 to 5 miles, a circle around your hotel. If you're in downtown Manhattan, maybe it's only a block or two, right? But you're trying to protect your area so that you can do the best and not lose guests to, a competitor with your same hotel right nearby. Well, and you raise an excellent question. Of course, COVID and the pandemic had an extreme impact on the industry. I mean, a lot of our members, they just had to shut their hotels down because nobody was traveling. Maybe they were getting one or two guests in a 200-room property. I mean, you can't even make money on that. So a lot of them had to shut down. And then they reopened. And of course, as you said, guests, the whole travel industry had changed. Many businesses were not doing big conferences or not doing big meetings. On the flip side, individuals, families, they called it revenge travel, where they just could not wait to get out of the house. Right. But so in some areas, especially if you had a hotel near a beach or near a vacation spot, you maybe suddenly saw, high occupancy rates and even better, guest rates. Whereas other parts of the country, our members continued to struggle. So we're starting to see the business travel come back, but it's not at the same levels. We're not quite sure what's going to come next. There are projections that 2024 could be a little slow. I think 2023, a lot of our members did very well, and especially with families and other travelers wanting to go and willing to pay high prices. But now we're starting to see that slow down. So no one knows quite what that looks like in the future. You just have to prepare for it. And so some of these others, what was the second one? Climate change. Climate change, that is always a concern, right? Because that, not only because of the kind of wild weather patterns that of course impacts everybody. I mean, everything from more tornadoes to, heat that hits the different areas. But our members are very concerned too about just sustainability practices and what that looks like, for their hotels. So it's being mindful of that. Another one obviously is even AI. What does that mean? What is that going to look like for hotels? Right. And everybody has to be on top of that too. I mean, and we're starting to see it, with your phone, you can now get keys made. Right. And you don't have to check in at the front desk anymore. Is that good? Maybe it's more convenient, but yet does it open the door for more crime? So that is a concern that the motels and the hotels have to be aware of. So there's a lot of changes on the horizon. So it's just being able to adapt and pivot. And, but one thing I love about AAHOA members is they are always bullish on the market. They're bullish on the industry. So, and I know, our officers and chair sometimes says that they're the only ones foolish enough sometimes to continue to build these hotels. But they're looking at the long term. They see the success of their families and their hotels over so many years. And so they continue to invest in the industry and just figure that, they'll approach it. They're hard workers, extremely smart business people, and, they've done very well in the industry. And so they continue to march forward and get it done. Right. So the Airbnb industry, and I'll call it that, has had an impact on hotels. And on the one hand, our members, do not mind if a family wants to rent out their home, for a couple weeks a year. That is not a problem at all. It's more a concern that we're starting to see this practice now, that big companies are coming into communities and buying up all the affordable housing and turning those into Airbnbs. And so we're working with a lot of local communities and even states, because the practice is unfair. And what I mean by that, as a hotel owner, you have to be regulated, you have to have your business licenses, you have to have your inspections, and then you pay hotel occupancy taxes. And so we're seeing with a lot of these communities, the Airbnbs, they're not being treated the same. So they don't even have to be licensed per se. There's no regulations, and they're not paying hotel occupancy taxes. So it's an unfair competition. You know, our members never mind competition. You know, competition drives innovation. But at the same time, if the Airbnbs can come in and attract guests because their rates can be so much lower because they're not paying all these taxes and they're not subjected to these same regulations, then that's where it's unfair. And so that's what we're really trying to do with legislation, is make sure that it's then, you know, truly competitive, and then guests can choose what they would prefer. Yes, so it's been at the state and local levels because, and it's interesting, states have also been grappling with this, and so there's been different state legislation, but then also really every city has to decide, you know, what's best for that community, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, you know, solution. And so they continue to work through this, and we are working very closely with a lot of state associations to help monitor what's going on. And then AAHOA members come together and they'll testify at hearings or write letters or, you know, contact the elected officials to voice their opinion. Yes. Well, and I hope, and, you know, and we all are strategizing on how to make this happen, but to continue to grow bigger and continue to grow better and even bolder, because AAHOA now has reached a point that it has a voice. It is the voice of all hotel owners in this country. And so what does that mean? There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And so in Washington, D.C., you know, I'm very excited and proud for this, but here we are in our 35th year anniversary, and for the first time ever, AAHOA is now responsible for helping to introduce legislation at the federal level, and it's called the Lions Act, and it was Congressman Sri Thanedar who introduced it. He's from Michigan, and it's a bill that allows the SBA 7A loans to increase from $5 million to $10 million. So that would make a huge impact, because this was originally last set in 2010. Well, over the last 14 years, we all know inflation rates, everything has increased. So to instead have a $10 million access to an SBA loan, especially if you're buying a hotel, renovating a hotel, would make a huge difference for our members. So we're very excited by that, and I anticipate that we will continue to do that. That as we build these relationships with U.S. senators, members of Congress, have a voice with them, we can get legislation introduced that would benefit our members, or we can stop legislation that would harm them. And then take that at the federal level, but then expand it to the state and local levels as well. So I think that's a major push for AAHOA to continue to, you know, have a say and be a powerhouse in this industry. And I see that especially with this younger generation coming up. You know, so many of them have been educated in the finest universities, and they are smart, and they are ready to, you know, take action and expand their portfolios and make sure that things are being done in the right way. So yes and no. And what I mean by that is I am very encouraged, because I came back now to AAHOA almost 2 years ago in the role of president and CEO. And I have just been so encouraged to see that, for example, this week at AAHOACon, our youngest chairman ever will now become the chair, right? He's been the vice chair, but now he'll become the chair. And he's so young that he was not even born yet when AAHOA was formed back in, 35 years ago. So to see that now we have such a young leader at the helm who's going to be leading the association, that has caused so many young professionals to want to get more involved, because they say, oh my goodness, we recognize, we have a young leader now and we want to support him, and he's open to some of our ideas. And so just a few months ago, we launched our first ever, it's called the HYPE Conference, and it stands for Helping young professionals evolve, okay? And we had a strong turnout there. I anticipate we'll do this every year, and it will just get stronger and stronger. So I think there's definitely the resources and the opportunities to attract the younger generation. But you know, as you mentioned, you know, one of the struggles is always to overcome maybe the perception of the barrier by maybe the younger generation that, oh, that's my dad's, you know, association, or that's my parents' association. That's not for me. And that's why, to me, I think there's still, of course, some of that perception, but to now have Mirage stepping in his chair where they say, wait a minute, you know, maybe this is my association.
How old is he?